Welcome everyone to the Let's Talk ICP podcast. Today we have with us a special guest, the founder of SCINET, Hank Brigham, and Jordan Smith, is the co-founders of SCINET. SCINET is a decentralized scientific research, life science platform that revolutionizes the way people do and support science. It's powered by blockchain technology, by Internet Computer Protocol, and SCINET allows retail and institutional investors to invest directly in life science research and technology with security and authenticity. That's cool. That's amazing. This is one of the best projects, I think, and the most potential project that I see in Internet Computer. Thanks a lot, Hank and Jordan, for your time today.
No problem. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah, as always, I'm so curious about your background, your experience before to found SCINET, before to start everything, how you meet yourselves, and how you start all these things before. I know you are like a totally different backgrounds, and I'm so curious to know more about you and the audience for sure.
Yeah, so we definitely do have a sort of a non-standard background to be working in life sciences research. However, the way I got into this was actually quite a few years ago when my second son was born, almost 7 years ago now, and he came down very shortly after being born with something called eczema herpeticum. And it is a pretty scary looking skin condition that is normal eczema that gets infected with the herpes virus. And we didn't know what it was. We'd had to go to a couple different doctors to get a diagnosis. But then once it was diagnosed, they gave us an antiviral cream that worked in 4 days. And it was very few times in my life have I seen medicine work that quickly and somebody be cured of something. And so I was very surprised and impressed with it. And the drug is called acyclovir, and that actually was invented by a lady named Gertrude Elion, who was born almost 100 years prior to my son Solomon. And she was a Nobel Prize winner in physiology and medicine, one of 12 women who have been, and a genius. And it took her 17 years to develop this drug. And in fact, it takes 17 years for life sciences research on average to go from in the lab to real life. And I was thinking about like how long it takes for these kinds of life-changing innovations to happen. And I was thinking about that, in fact, all through my MBA program, which I completed in 2021. And this was during COVID as well. And so I was really shocked because this was on my mind when the RNA vaccines for COVID-19 came out so quickly, because I had just really been thinking hard about the fact that they were slow, and then all of a sudden it was fast this time. And but you know, it's not great that it takes the combined might of all of the world's scientific labs and all of the world's governments to come up with a single vaccine, right? So I realized that something could be done quickly. We just had to figure out sort of what levers to pull and what things to do to make it so that that could be done much more regularly. So between my business background, at my MBA, I specialized in strategic thinking, startup entrepreneurship, US business law, and blockchain technology. And a previous career in investment advisory, I've kind of brought this information to bear on a new problem, which is how I got introduced to Hank through one of my previous cohort mates at the MBA program, and she introduced me to Hank, and then things took off, and I'll turn it over to Hank for his intro.
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, so I'm Hank. I've been a software engineer for going on 7 years now. I have a background in economics, went to the University of Texas, go Horns, and have been in the Web3 space for about 2 years. As Jordan said, we met through one of his former colleagues. And when I heard about the prospect of SCINET, I was immediately excited because of the philanthropic aspects of the opportunity, just being able to accelerate science and give our species a better chance of survival. But yeah, we've been at this for almost 2 years now, and we're really excited to be here today and talk about our project.
Mm-hmm. And how the idea of SCINET comes about, because for me, like science and blockchain, this is something like is coming to my mind. If I think in the future and I'm thinking in science, and then blockchain, artificial intelligence, these type of things, I think is something like we can do a lot to progress and a lot to improve in this type of technologies and business. When we're thinking about blockchain, we think more in money, right? In business, in DeFi, social media platforms, this type of business, but not in science. And we have a lot, and it's like a huge, it's like at the high hem of the blockchain is science, right? And yes, I'm curious, like how the SCINET idea comes about, and because you made together, and then why you decided start something related with science, because you Hank have more technical background and Jordan have more finance background.
Yeah, so for me, it was really just about, once I started looking at how long it took for science to get done, specifically life sciences research, and what the factors were that were blocking it. Clearly, it's not commitment by the scientists themselves to get their work done. I'm sure they want to do it more than anybody. But I just started getting really frustrated by that, because I look at the future a lot. I am very excited about emerging technologies, and I am very passionate about longevity, and I want those things to happen fast. And partly it's maybe self-serving a little bit, but for the most part, it's because I just have this great vision of a world where scientific research gets done in a matter of months, not decades. And I truly believe that life sciences research specifically is going to be one of the biggest influencers on the future path of our species. And so, it's certainly not my original background that made me get on this, but rather my passion for it that put me on this path. And when I started talking to Hank about my ideas, which admittedly 2 years ago were not nearly as well formed as they are now, but I was just talking to him about, like, there's got to be ways that we can come up with software to solve some of these problems. And I was listing out what turned out to be basically all of the hallmark benefits of blockchain technology. I hadn't even considered it at first. And Hank was the one who said, what you're saying is already there in most blockchain technologies. And by the way, the Internet Computer Protocol is the one that we should be doing it on. So it was not so much of a leap to get to science for me, because it's been something that I was paying attention for a long time to, but rather the leap to Web3 was the big decision factor, and getting into decentralized science, or DeSci. If you're curious about what brought us to the internet computer specifically, I think probably Hank would be a great person to respond to that.
Yeah, so just in vetting like potential blockchain solutions, it became pretty clear that ICP was the best candidate for us, just because it allows us to provide a heightened experience to users. It's more secure, scales infinitely. You can store files and just standard data on the chain. So it's really extensible, flexible as well. Yeah, so we love ICP.
Yeah, and I'd also say too that once I started looking at it, I was extremely impressed with how much of their resources they put into making it better all the time. And as we've seen just recently with how quickly the pace of AI technology is, every single week or even more frequent than that, there is a new development somewhere happening on that. And I think that if with the internet computers and DFINITY's vision of a world computer and the blockchain singularity, it's extremely important to stay on top of technological advancements. They've been dedicating lots of resources to research and development. And every time something new pops up, it's like, oh, that is something that is going to help us with building what we're building. And it's just been a really great ecosystem to be a part of, especially with the generosity that they've given us with 2 developer grants on top of that. It's really a good match, I'd say.
Yeah. Also, I assume in your case for the data privacy and these type of things as well, because it's so important in science, the Internet Computer Protocol is have like a independent node providers, right? It means it's not in a centralized server, it's not on Amazon Web Services or in Google Cloud. Just in case, for example, if something happens or it's like a hack or any big problem, at least on internet computer, your data is there. It's immutable. It's tamper proof. No one can steal the information, and that's honestly the best way to save the data. And also, did you value various blockchains? You did like a score or like a ranking, and then it's like ICP was the first one, or you have like directly this is the best blockchain, or maybe you like have like other options and then decided for ICP. How it was that?
So
Yeah,
so oh, go ahead.
we basically just made a pros and cons list of several chains. Ethereum and layer 2s like Optimism or Polygon seem to be the de facto choices for blockchains for like DeSci companies. And Ethereum is great, but it's expensive. It's not very fast. Doesn't scale well. And so ICP was the clear choice because it just checked every box for us. And like you said, it even allows us to decouple ourselves from having to have a cloud provider, essentially. And we were big proponents of a fully decentralized future for science, and ICP allows us to have that.
Cool. Yeah, and then we're talking about blockchain, about science, but what is exactly SCINET? What is the value proposition of SCINET? What is your vision? What problems try to solve SCINET? In a nutshell, or at least like explain for general.
So SCINET is sort of an interesting entry into the world of DeSci. We, for example, are not a DAO right now. Maybe with the advent of the SNS, we will become one. But the goal is to use the Web3 technologies that are out there to enhance how science is done. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this time frame of how on average it takes 17 years for life sciences research to get out of the lab and into real life use, there is a whole host of underlying causes for that. Up to this point, we've identified at least 18 causes that contribute to this delay. And so what we're doing now is trying to build software that address those underlying causes so that we can have an effect across that entire spectrum of 18 problems. At first, before looking into this, I sort of assumed that it was the FDA that was causing this delay. It's a very common sort of right-wing political comment to make that the FDA is just over-regulatory and that's why we don't have any innovation. And maybe there is like a small amount of truth to that, but as we looked into it, it's not even close to the biggest issue.
Mhm.
And so once we started looking at all of these issues, the one that we saw that was probably the most straightforward to address were problems involved in funding. And overarchingly, we're trying to help scientists fund, conduct, publish, and commercialize scientific research, specifically life sciences research, with greater speed and accuracy than ever before. We want it to happen in months, not decades. And so we have to come up with ways to even create 10x improvements in those areas. And starting with funding, we're building a funding platform for life sciences research, where we call it sci-fi for science finance, and scientists can post up projects. They can submit projects to us that they can articulate rigorous underlying science, positive world impact, and strong potential for commercialization. And after those projects get vetted, they're available for the community to fund and receive tokenized assets in exchange for their support, like, for example, royalty tokens. And we want to open that up to the ICP community first to be able to participate in those projects, and then open it up even further afterwards. And what they'll receive when they receive those royalty tokens is essentially the right to receive a portion of the revenue generated by that science in the future. We have a lot more in the pipeline after that, but essentially it's a software ecosystem to try to solve a whole bunch of problems in life sciences research and make their lives better and make their work go faster.
Mm-hmm. And do you think like nowadays science world and the science business is like a monopoly, right? We have like a bunch of big companies that they have their own research, their own laboratories. This no transparent is sometimes honestly they don't interest to know all the information, no, to the population, and maybe try to stop the advance of research or just for business purposes, right? And I think maybe the blockchain and SCINET can also address this problem, right? It's so transparent, is scalable, is for everyone. Avoid honestly all the manual processes. The trial and error investigations sometimes is like missing reports, and with maybe with a lot of years, a lot of generations, and then no one continues this one. And this is like it's like a treasury, right? You can save all the information there on the blockchain or internet computer protocol, and maybe for like any disease or illness, we don't have the answer now, or maybe not in 20 years, or maybe even not in 100 years, but the information is there. And maybe someone, any scientist in 2130 can achieve or address or figure out how to solve this illness or whatever. And this is honestly more than a blockchain, more than this is something for help the world, right? To achieve more things and help the people. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, I agree entirely. And while our goal is to try to do as much as possible for that, so that it doesn't take 100 years to solve a problem, the beauty of what we're doing is, even if there are just some problems that are currently outside of the capabilities of the world at the moment, because it's on the blockchain and because it's a permanent record, you're right, that will be there for somebody to use and extract value from in a way that helps people someday in the future. And what you were saying about the companies, the big companies that sort of have monopolies, it's interesting because in the 4 categories that we talked about, again, funding, conducting, publishing, and commercializing, there are the big players in all of these categories. And their goals, I believe that there are people at those companies that have good intentions. But as sort of a business mission, their goals are not to solve the problem that we're trying to solve, which is try to make things happen as quickly as possible while still staying accurate and safe. And just as an example, in funding, it's the federal grant process, at least in the United States. NIH and NSF pay for the vast majority of life sciences research that happens in the US, and the amount of grants are going up, or the grant proposals, I should say, are going up every year, and yet the award rate stays in the low 20%. And even though scientists have to spend up to half their time, or sometimes even more, just seeking these grants, they don't, hardly any of them actually get it. And they have extreme levels of scientific expertise in their field that's getting just wasted away on this other activity. And it's this giant system, as much help as it has been over the years in funding important scientific research, that has become the very thing that is supposed to be enabling science, has become the blocker for science in many ways. And the same thing happens in conducting research. There's just a current paradigm of either you use a physical lab notebook, which ends up just sitting on somebody's shelf. We've had numerous interviews of PIs at different labs around the country where we see on their bookshelves behind them just lines and lines of physical lab notebooks. And one of them we asked, like, do you guys ever take those out? And he said, no, we never ever touch them. And that's just information that's locked away. And then for publishing, you've got Elsevier and the other big journal companies who prioritize sensational research, and what ends up happening is the most sensational research ends up being the least reproducible research. In fact, in the US alone, life sciences research spending there's $28 billion spent on life sciences research spending in the US that is not reproducible. And that is a result of, again, these institutions that ostensibly should be facilitating the research end up, for some reason, inhibiting it in many ways. So one tragic example of this is the Purdue Pharma issue with the opiate epidemic. We've seen in research and in this real life example that there are perverse incentives associated with industry funded research. And there's also good things that come out of it, but in this case, it wasn't. There were millions of lives affected because of the falsification of information that they published in their own journals, which the FDA relied on to make decisions about the safety of the drug, and it wasn't okay. And in research papers that we've reviewed, it shows that up to 90% of the time, when industries fund the research ends up being favorable to whoever funded it. And that's like not a big surprise, but it is sad. And so when you're talking about these sort of monopolistic institutions that exist, it would be great if they had their massive resources out that they have at their disposal to try to solve these problems, but they don't. And so we have to.
Yeah. And just to clarify, that's $28 billion a year that is wasted on non-reproducible science.
Yeah.
Okay. And Hank, what is exactly the technology behind SCINET? We mentioned before about the blockchain, about internet computer, but how it works exactly, the SCINET Cloud Laboratory, how enhance laboratory workflows, and this type of things behind the scenes, because for sure SCINET is a great project, and is the mission and the vision is pretty clear, but behind the scenes is like a lot of work, a lot of technology, and you are the expert in these things. How it exactly works, and if you can explain a little bit more about internet computer, canisters, or exactly the mechanism about the SCINET. Yeah.
Great question. So the digital R&D lab, which we're calling R&DNA at the moment, it's basically a massive data ingestion platform, all built on IC. So the back end consists of internet computer smart contracts. We're also going to have an electronic lab notebook, which you can think about as like a more sophisticated tablet where you can write on it. That's like geared towards note taking and conducting scientific research. And then there's that paired with other things like IoT devices and web applications that let you manage the data and your team permissions and monetization, things like that. So we actually haven't started developing that yet. That's more of what's next. But we are really excited to start that, and we feel that it's going to fit really well with our current product that we're building, which is called Sci-Fi. So when that's done, scientists can just basically click a button and create an IP NFT to monetize their data. There will be several ways to do that to actually facilitate the monetization. For instance, they can create royalty tokens and sell those. And so if you purchase one of these royalty tokens, then you're entitled to future revenue splits of revenues that are generated from the intellectual property. So that's just like one way to do it. We're also planning to support the creation of like scientific art as NFTs and allow scientists to fundraise that way as well. But additionally, they can also sell licenses to use and access their intellectual property, and even sell the whole IP NFT in its entirety. So really exciting stuff. We're stoked to be here and to be building this. We feel like we are going to make a big difference in the lives of many. So yeah, that's kind of the tech in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a good idea. The NFTs for sure, like monetize the content, monetize the research, and also get investors involved is another part. It's like more than the tokenomics part of SCINET, but it's really important as well to create business and generate business for researchers and for the people that put the information and the research on the SCINET blockchain on internet computer. The intellectual property that you mentioned is something pretty complex, right? Because it's like a dichotomy between, okay, I want to share the data, but I want to protect the data, right? In the intellectual property. And this is really cool how the SCINET manage these things, and how like, okay, this is transparent, we can share the data, we can monetize the data for everyone, for other projects, other hospitals, other labs, whatever. But by the other hand, we need to ensure to protect the science and help the researchers and scientists with the security of the blockchain of internet computer. How you manage this one, the intellectual property and the dichotomy between share and protect?
Yeah, great question. So with our IP NFTs, we had the concept of whitelists, where we can whitelist certain principles that will effectively have access to view the intellectual property. On top of that, if your wallet or your principal is associated with the IP NFT itself, you own it, right? So you can also view it, manipulate it, and whatnot. But yeah, it's this relationship between the principal and the token itself, and the ownership therein.
And also the scientist community is something pretty important for you. I know you are working as well in like a social media for scientists, for researchers. This is so cool. I'm not sure if you want to share more information, or by now this is just like a project, but the scientific community, this is something amazing, right? Because we are like used to see like, okay, Instagram, TikTok, memes, these type of things, but for sure scientists needs to share their knowledge. They have questions, and maybe in their lab they cannot solve the information, but maybe in the other part of the world another team are working on the same thing, and maybe they have the solution, and maybe they can work together, not only for share the reports, also for work like maybe together. How you are trying to achieve this this program?
So this is a very important aspect of the ecosystem that we're trying to build. It's the third dApp that we'll be building. and we have sort of deliberately not fleshed out all the details on that, just so that we don't get distracted with what we're building right now.
Yeah.
But the way it will fit into here is to solve a few. We need to make sure that it's solving problems and moving the needle towards better research in general. And the two things that it's going to solve are here. One is, we know that for every new research discipline that is brought to bear on a specific research question, there's a 20% increase in how efficiently and quickly that research is done. And I can even send you the papers that are on that, because I was so impressed to see that this is such a strong case for interdisciplinary research. The problem is, interdisciplinary research is not prioritized by most sources of funding. And that is an issue, because it's like you're losing out on 20% of your effectiveness here. And so just that, building into the ecosystem a collaborative social media platform will help with this interdisciplinary issue. There are plenty of institutions that are out there right now that have already figured out the value of this, and they just changed their name, so I can't remember, but there's this organization where businesses submit problems to this community, and they specifically ask for people who are not in that industry to propose solutions, because they've figured out that there is this element of not having the same preconceived notions as the people who are so deep into the trenches on that they dismiss things that they think are not worthy, but that somebody who knows nothing about it, but who might be a smart person, is going to start from first principles again. And that's the same value that you get in interdisciplinary research. The big poster child example that we are thinking about right now is the field of quantum biology. And quantum biology is something that we learned about while talking to a researcher at UCLA who runs their quantum biology lab. And she's not a biologist. She is a quantum engineer. She has biologists on her team. But the cool thing is because of that intersection and fusion of their disparate areas of research together, it's setting them on this path to be one of the massive major scientific revolutions in the world. And just here's a very small use case for it. There are electromagnetic fields that are emitted by mobile devices like our cell phones, and they are working right now on the prospect of calibrating how those electromagnetic fields emit in order to increase the speed of wound healing. So you imagine you've got Samsung with Samsung Health, or Apple with their version of that, how impactful it could be for just a software update essentially to be pushed out to those phones, so that it will change what kind of field is being emitted. Or a worst case scenario, in the next flagship phone, they have a different, maybe slightly different hardware calibration. And then in parts of the world where health care is not great, but cell phones are ubiquitous, that could change lives. That could mean life and death. That could mean somebody being out of work for 2 weeks instead of a month and a half. And those things are super important, and it's only happening because of interdisciplinary research. So that's one thing that it will be solving. The other thing is, it's a perfect place to publish. You've seen publishing happen on social media in other places like LinkedIn with Pulse and things like that. And there's good precedent for doing that. And we think that it will be a way to help free scientists from having this overbearing need to only publish things that they really think are going to get into the best journals, or just publish whatever they can in order to get into whatever journal, because if you don't publish, you perish in scientific research and you can't get grants. This way, they'll have access to a ready-made community of peer reviewers. We can deploy token incentives to solve a bunch of problems in peer review as well, which for many scientists is basically just a perfunctory activity and not really serving the purpose that it's supposed to, which is to make sure that the science is good. And so between those two things, or three things I should say, the interdisciplinary and collaborative aspect of things, the new place to publish where scientists aren't going to have to spend $14,000 just to publish in Nature, for example, so that other people can read it, and solving problems in peer review, that's where this decentralized social media platform will be really effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I'm trying to put on the shoes of investors or the scientifics. For example, it's just like a real case. Okay, imagine I'm an investor, right? A VC or a business angel or whatever, and I realize like there is like a good lab, like they have developing something pretty cool for like an illness or whatever, and I want to invest in this project. By the other hand, this lab, they need funds. They try to raise funds, and then they try to get people involved in the project because they need more staff, right, to help them to improve and also to continue to investigate on their research. What is exactly the SCINET vision here? How SCINET can help the scientists and the founders or the investors to connect together?
Yeah, so there are three main ways that this can happen. And the first way is with our current DApp that we're building, SciFi. This is where, the way we currently envision it, the scientists can publish their research projects that they want to receive funding for to this platform, and where the ICP community and then also the rest of the world can look at these projects that will have already been vetted and say, oh, I love that one. I think this one's cool, or whatever. And then they can provide funding to them in order to help further their work. And that is the main mechanism to try to get the funding going. There are some other things as well that can happen down the road. For example, we're not trying to replace grant writing, but what we want to do is make there be more options. And if we maybe even relieve some pressure on the grant writing, then the award rates for people who do still apply for grants will probably go up as well. And if we can improve the quality of publishing, and the quality of published research and the quality of research being done, then people will have better track records and will have better likelihood of getting approved for those grants. So we're not saying grants should go away. We're just trying to solve some problems associated with how those grants work right now. And then finally, there are ways to commercialize research even before the research is fully done that can bring money back into the lab in order to help them keep going and doing what they're doing. And like a very basic example is what Hank mentioned previously, which is the art. So say somebody finds something that's not even necessarily revolutionary, but just interesting under the microscope. And so I actually have a research microscope in my basement, because at one point I was thinking of setting up a DIY biology lab down there, and I had my camera plugged into it so you can have pictures taken straight into the microscope, and it's something that's done much more sophisticated in the labs themselves. And so they can just snap a picture of that and pop off an NFT of that image or whatever, and put it on SciFi. Or anywhere, but we would like it to be on SciFi eventually. And then people who think that that's interesting or cool, or just it's like a way of patronizing that science by buying the art in order to continue to help fund the research. That's another way that they can get funding in order to keep doing their work that they're doing. Aside from that, there's the licensing, which happens probably a little bit farther down the road once there's something that is actually usable by a company in one of their manufacturing processes, or their drug development processes, or their medical device processes, or what, it's such a wide range of things. But once there's something there that they could actually use and incorporate, then they can pay licensing fees to the scientists as well through SciFi. So we're definitely hitting that funding and financing from a lot of different angles. And the fact is that once you go through a couple raises on sci-fi, your project will probably at that point where you're going to be ready to talk to some VCs. And that is where the bigger bucks come in. And so this whole thing is designed to get them going so that they can jumpstart this phase that we call the valley of death. That is called in life sciences research, where you get a little bit of basic research done, but then you can never get it into translation to the real world because of this. One of the problems is because of this funding gap here, which we're trying to fill. So
yeah. Okay, I want to ask you 2 or 3 questions, more funny questions related with internet computer. But first, Hank mentioned before about the NFTs and its NFTs incentives, the reward mechanism, and also you are mentioning now the different ways to finance and fundraising money for the projects. What is the idea for the tokens you are going to? Because I assume that if it's on the blockchain, it's not like fiat. Yeah? I assume it's through the NFTs is in ICP values. Also, we are launched the CKBTC, the chain key Bitcoin. Not sure if maybe your idea is more create a new token, like SCINET token for the future. Maybe this is a pretty early stages for that, but I'm curious what you can share with us more information about the ideas. You mentioned also before a DAO, maybe in the future, but in terms of tokenomics, in terms of the money and if different investors want to invest in projects, they can do through the ICP tokens, or your idea is launch a SCINET token?
So we're planning to start with ICP and then branch out to CKBTC and eventually USDC once the Ethereum bridge is implemented or we implement ECDSA ourselves. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, investors and scientists will have at least 3 and 4 potentially options for fundraising, right? And yes, we are dancing around the idea of creating a DAO now and utilizing the SNS to create these DAO tokens, SCINET tokens, SCIN, SCNT. We haven't really landed on our ticker yet, but that's the idea. And yeah, so basically, this is kind of like the flow of how sci-fi works. Scientists come on the application, they make an account, they create a project, the project gets submitted for vetting. If it passes vetting, then it gets approved. At that point, the scientists can start the monetization process, and that looks like this. They can basically make their IP NFT. They add additional resources to the metadata for the IP NFT, so that could be the link to the patent, or really any online documents that are public, right, that they want to associate with the IP. And then they upload their IP files. So the files can be data sets or the patent document itself, the licensing agreements, things like that. And then finally, they create their royalty tokens. And then they create rounds after that to sell batches of the tokens themselves. So they dictate all right, token's going to be worth 5 ICP. This round's going to have 1,000 tokens. It expires at this point and start the round. And at that point, investors can come on and they purchase ICP from some other exchange like Coinbase, and we're going to have a really easy, simple flow where they can, to top up their wallet, all they need to do is just click a button and they can buy ICP tokens or Bitcoin or whatever from Coinbase or other exchanges right in app. It's pretty nifty. And then those tokens get sent to their wallet. Once they're available, they can use them to purchase the NFTs. And then later down the line, the scientist sells any licensed tokens or actually sells and transfers the whole IP NFT. Then the revenues generated from those transactions get programmatically split amongst the royalty token holders. And if the IP NFT gets purchased, then everybody gets paid out, and then those existing tokens get burned. So that's kind of how it works in a nutshell.
Yeah.
There's a little more to it on like the R&D&A side. We have some really cool ideas, such as forking research. So like, let's say, I'm going on a tangent now, but let's say you're a scientist and you did a bunch of work and then your research stopped, but you made your research public. And then I come along, I'm also a scientist, and I stumble upon your research. It's, really awesome. And I want to use it. And what I can effectively do is fork that research into mine. And if I monetize my IP at all, and I used your data, then you would get a portion of my revenues.
And that's all managed just programmatically by the smart contracts we'll have built in to the system. And again, this also helps solve a problem with data access and the big journals. Not that we're trying to make those journals go away, but institutions and individual scientists end up spending lots and lots of money just to access those, much less regular people. Like I have to email scientists to ask them for copies of their papers because I can't get access to a lot of them because I can't pay for those journals. And they'll send them to me. They like to share it, but they say, you can't share it with anybody else, but here's the copy. And so if there's other ways for this data to be visible, maybe there is going to be some amount of like a nominal fee for accessing it, but it's nothing close to what it would be to go read the paper and then have to, all the costs associated with being able to publish and access there. So just another way we're solving that problem as well.
And what you mean the NFTs? Your idea is like trade the NFTs directly on SCINET or support maybe on Entrepot or other marketplaces for the NFTs, or once one project want to fundraise and get the NFTs for sell the NFTs or whatever. What is your idea about that? Put on any marketplaces or directly on the SCINET?
Great question. So we are requiring KYC for our investors. And based on that, we feel that it's best to protect the investors and the researchers to only have the trading and the listing on SciFi, at least to start, until we have more like compliance for the platform. So if it's on Entrepot, like, we can't trust that those users have facilitated KYC, essentially.
And it's not that we don't we don't have like a specific distrust of the ICP community, for example, but in order to, and it's not about like forcing everything to stay on our ecosystem, though that does kind of give us somewhat of an economic moat there, which is helpful. But the big point is that because of the massive impacts that this science can have, we don't want to have them experience some things that could taint that science. For example, I can only imagine what kind of scandal would be caused if North Korea, for example, had used some kind of state actor, company, or person to funnel money through our platform. It touched a bunch of these scientific projects, but in the meantime, they were laundering their money and all kinds of things. Like, it would taint the research, it would taint our reputation, much less if it was like a terrorism financing thing or what have you. So we just have to make sure those kinds of things don't happen, or do what we can to make sure that those things don't happen. And I'm certain that as the ubiquity of ICP dApps in general increases, that things like that the other DEXs that are on there will start implementing certain kinds of KYC as well. And when that happens, it will be less of a concern for us. But for now, we want to protect the scientists, and we do that by implementing KYC, and we also want to protect the investors. So we do due diligence on the scientists and their projects as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Have sense. And remind me like the same of the tainted Bitcoin, right? Now in the CKBTC, the Affinity team and also Tonic Labs are working on the Know Your Transaction. And directly, one canister in the CKBTC is connected directly with chain analysis and other providers. Now it's a little bit centralized, because for sure it's like a private companies, but the idea is find in the future like any provider similar to chain analysis but on chain. And this is really cool. They pay like 50 cents just for have the information, and it's a way to avoid tainted Bitcoin, right? Like for terrorism or something bad, like money laundering about the Bitcoin. Is something like similar but related with NFTs.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard about that part of the project. I'm actually going to look into that because I think that's important. But I also don't think it really is a negative thing to utilize a somewhat centralized part of your process. The whole point of HTTP out calls, which I thought was an excellent development done by DFINITY on the Internet Computer, is to be able to access resources that are not on chain. And if you just like have this on chain only fundamentalism, then it's going to have a lot slower progress, because there are services that are out there right now that do a pretty good job that can fill gaps, at least in the short and medium term, until blockchain singularity is achieved, right? So I have no issues with it. I mean, we're considering using and do use some off-chain technologies in the short term. They're just a way for us to make sure that we get things done. And when we can do it on chain, then we will. And I think that's okay too.
Yeah, and we are naive if we think everything on the decentralized way and everything on the blockchain can solve all the problems, right? We live in a world, in a democracy, with governments, with a lot of barriers, and it is what it is, right? It's not easy, just chain Web 2 to Web 3, and okay, everything is on chain, everything is... No, right? We need to, and sometimes these type of centralized entities can change the mind of the population, right? If someone said like on chain analysis, for example, or in other centralized entities, no, but CKBTC is tainted, right? CKBTC and Affinity and ICPs try to, like avoid pay taxes, or the money is like it's dirty money, right? And it is what it is, and we need to.
So how do we avoid paying taxes?
We need to try to collaborate together. Yeah, that's true. But it's an interesting point, right? This one and the way that you are trying to solve is similar, and it's an interesting idea. Okay, and then just for finish the conversation, this super interesting conversation with the founders of SCINET. I'm curious if you are 8 years young. It means if you have ICPs and stake it for 8 years. Be honest with me, please.
I have not staked any ICP,
Okay.
just because I need it to be liquid for the company.
That's good.
Yeah.
A good
I'm in the same boat, and I did try to do some recently, actually, though, but I use Kraken for my purchases, and they just shut down ACH transactions last week. In fact, I tried to bring some over for that exact purpose, and then they sent me an email saying, hey, you didn't actually bring any money in because we have shut down ACH transactions. I don't know the story behind why they're doing that, because that seems kind of crazy that they won't do ACH transactions, but maybe there's some regulatory thing that they're dealing with right now. But I am like fully on board with the idea of that. And in fact, when we do have a token, we will also be doing different things to make sure that people hold those tokens for a long time, because we want to make sure that there are no just dumps that happen. It's a tragic thing that can, when people who sort of believe in the vision of what you do and they kind of go all in, and then somebody else comes along and pumps and dumps, and we don't want that to happen on our token. We don't want it to happen in ICP. And so like, we're all about it, but we just haven't been able to yet.
Yeah. Anyways, if you stay for 6 months or 8 years, best way, sorry, best way is do it in the NNS, right? In the network nervous system, in the DAOs of internet computer. It's more secure, and you avoid things that you mentioned about Kraken or other centralized blockchains. You need to buy there, but then transfer to your wallet, to the NNS or any other cold wallet for sure. Another question. Are you using any DApp on internet computer? Are you using OpenChat or Network Nervous System or District, Discover? I know you're pretty active in District, Jordan, and Discovery as well. Yeah, I'm cool.
Getting there.
If you're using other dApps like video games or whatever.
Yeah, so I'll let Jordan talk in a second about social things, but going to give a shout out to CycleOps and CanScale. We're currently using CanScale to scale our canisters, and we're going to use CycleOps to essentially maintain them and keep them topped up.
Cool, nice.
Also, we are using NFID, right, for identity management as well, and they've been definitely good collaborators. We're very interested in any dApps that we can use and work together on building what we're building. We have also contributed to the ecosystem as well with our admittedly alpha version of the word is escaping me. The search.
Oh, the Elasticsearch.
Yeah, Elasticsearch functionality, which is very important for people to be able to search on their dApps or within the ecosystems that they use. We'll be launching a more developed version of that after we finish this grant and make that available to the community as well. I have just been also using a lot of the socials that are on there. Our first big blog post that we posted on Medium about some of the problems in how grants currently work. We also syndicated that to Nuance, which is one of the big blogging sites on the ICP. I've been working with Discover just in the past few days to get set up to create a DeSci portal as a place for the adherents of DeSci, however they happen to be on ICP, can start to have a place to like collaborate. Trying to wrap my social media skills around Web3 social, which it has been a little bit of an adjustment for me, but I'm getting there. So Discover and District primarily there. So those are the ones that we're using right now.
Cool. Yeah, you are so engaged with the ICP community, not only with SCINET, with other projects. As you mentioned, CycleOps, CanScale, NFID, Discover, District, Nuance. That's really cool. I'm happy to see like other projects are collaborating, right, together between yours. And that's really cool. Okay, yeah, thank you so much. That's all. It's a really interesting conversation with the founders of SCINET, Jordan Smith and Hank Brigham. I'm not sure if you want to share just your last thoughts with the community about SCINET or about ICP.
I do have one last thought. We talk a lot about like money at SCINET and getting money to the scientists, funding, revenue, commercialization. And it sometimes may come across as like that's the whole point. And it really isn't. However, but it's not some real like leap in insight for us to see that economic incentives go a really long way towards accelerating things. And that's why venture capital exists, because they, like, the whole point of venture capital is to generate extremely fast growth and progress in a certain company or industry or what have you. And we don't want to cheapen science by making it about money, but we definitely know that funding and commercialization are critical to having this massive acceleration of science that we're trying to bring to pass. So I just want to throw that out there, that it's not about being money hungry or anything like that, but we just know that it's a necessary thing, and we want to make sure that that happens. You know, we have a revenue model for our business, and we expect to generate revenue, but it's again a mission-based thing for us, and we want anybody who has a similar mission or who loves our vision to reach out to us and talk and see how we can work together.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you for the last talk. Hank, any other comment?
Yeah, I'll just close by saying that, you know, there was the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, and now we're trying to incept the scientific revolution, which is really just an acceleration of all of our current processes. So yeah, we welcome anyone who wants to be a part of it.
Great, awesome. Okay, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Hank, for your time. Founders of SCINET. It's a real pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.